foster care info session. We are specifically going to be focusing on a unique type of foster care that our agency offers called Refugee and Immigrant foster care. There's two programs that fall under that umbrella, the Unaccompanied Children Program and the Unaccompanied Refugee Minors Program. However, if you're interested more broadly in foster care, there'll still be some slides at the end that are true for all of foster care in Massachusetts, such as how to become licensed and some of the requirements for foster parents. And we welcome any of those more general questions too. But tonight we're just focused on this unique program. And if you haven't heard of Accentria is our agency. They are a large human services nonprofit in New England. We serve a variety of groups through all different programs. We have an adult refugee resettlement program called Services for New Americans. We have a language bank of interpreter services. We have a Good News Garage in New Hampshire that accepts car donations. And we also own and operate a couple of nursing homes and skilled nursing facilities, I should say, for older adults. So we do all kinds of things, really serving people ages 0 through 100. But we're, of course, focusing on our foster care youth services. So with that being said, this is our agenda for this evening. We'll be sure to introduce ourselves. We'll talk about the Unaccompanied Children Program and what that means. We'll talk about the Unaccompanied Refugee Minors Program. And then we'll talk about the steps to becoming a foster parent, ways that you can help, and we'll have time for questions. So without further ado, I'm Colleen. I'm the Community Outreach Manager for our foster care programs at Accentria. So in addition to refugee and immigrant foster care, I also support outreach for our intensive foster care program, which is a domestic or local foster care for youth that are from Massachusetts. And so my role is to really find caring adults in the community that can help our children. Primarily, my goal is to recruit new foster families, but I also work with volunteers and donors as well in my role. So it's sort of a big umbrella. And I've been with the agency for 6.5 years. Antonella?
So hello, my name is Antonella Leo. I am a foster parent recruitment coordinator for the Unaccompanied Children Program, but I also work for the Family Resource Department, that is to complete the license processing as well, the process.
Great. All right, and Antonella, you're going to start us off by talking about the UC program.
Yes, so the UC program or the Unaccompanied Children's Program, this program supports youth who have recently arrived in the U.S. without lawful immigration status, and they are currently under federal custody. So it operates alongside with the URM program and serves as a sister initiative to focusing mainly on the unique needs of these youth. So we serve the minors under 18 years of age, also youth whose legal status is pending, those that are from any racial and ethnicity backgrounds, also youth that have experienced significant trauma, which often also impacts their behavioral, emotional, and physical and mental health. So these are the special considerations for UC foster care. Accentria UC clinicians meet regularly with youth to offer emotional and therapeutic support, including monthly clinical group sessions. We also offer healthcare access, so the UC are enrolled in federal health insurance and receive additional support from Accentria's medical coordinator. We also offer foster parent trainings. All Accentria foster parents are required to complete annual trainings focused specifically on caring for unaccompanied children. And we also do supervision. So for their first 90 days in the program, UCs are not permitted to use a personal phone or access to social media, and they may not be left home alone.
Great. Thanks, Antonella. And the reason we kind of segue quickly into talking now about the Unaccompanied Refugee Minors program is because really the UC youth and the URM youth are the same kids. It's just where they are in their journey. So the UC youth, they're more recently arrived to the United States. As Antonella mentioned, they don't yet have a legal status. It's pending, and they're working with an immigration attorney to adjust their status. And so about 99% of those unaccompanied children, youth that we serve end up coming into this URM program once they obtain legal status. So it's sort of like they graduate from one program to the other. So in the UC program, they're sort of like the freshmen who are new here, and then they move on to be seniors in the unaccompanied refugee minors program. So that's one way of thinking of it. So it's really great for us because we get to be with the kids for a long time. We are a long-term foster care program. So for any youth that cross the US-Mexico border, typically, sometimes the Canada border, but not usually, immigration officials are determining, why are you here? What's going on with you? Where's mom and dad? And if they determine that they're not safe to return home, maybe they've experienced trafficking, maybe they have been threatened by gangs in home country or experienced other types of violence, then the goal is to keep them here in the United States and be safe. And the next step would be to see if there's any family that they have that they can reunify with. So if you're familiar at all with foster care, in traditional foster care, such as with DCF in Massachusetts, the number one goal for youth is reunification with birth parents or family. And for our youth, that's already been explored. They've already tried to find relatives in the US, or they've reached out to people. But unfortunately, for one reason or another, they're not able to reunify. So maybe they don't have any family in the US, or maybe the relatives that they do have aren't willing to care for them or aren't safe folks for them. And so that's where our program comes in, is we're sort of that final safety net for children, unaccompanied children that have nowhere else to go. And that's when we place them into our foster homes. So I just wanted to kind of give that little background on the relationship between the two programs. So definitely let me know if there's questions on that. So yeah, we do have some youth that come to us also directly into the URM program from other states, but pretty much all of our UC kids come into the URM program. So we're one big family over here. Okay. So getting back to basics a little bit, we use the acronyms a lot. URM is easier to say than unaccompanied refugee minor. And that's a child that has come to the US seeking safety and resources without a parent or guardian to care for them. So very similar definition to a UC, but in this case, it includes the term refugee, as there also could be refugee minors from overseas, which we don't see in the other programs. So that's kind of the biggest difference here. But other than that, it's a youth that's here without a parent or guardian. And it's youth with varying legal statuses. So as I mentioned, youth do have to obtain a legal status of some type to be eligible for this program. So that's what all of the UC youth are working on. Once they obtain this status, they're eligible for URM. So that status could be refugee, which is an official legal designation from overseas from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Could be an asylee, which is the same definition of a refugee, but they're physically present in the United States already. A victim of trafficking, so unfortunately a youth who has experienced labor, forced labor, or sexual exploitation. And then we also serve Afghan humanitarian parolee minors, which was more common back in 2023. And then our most common status is a special immigrant juvenile, which is a youth that has experienced abuse or neglect by a caregiver in home country, and therefore is seeking safety here. And it's not really important to understand all those different legal terms. what's really important to understand is just that what all of these youth have in common is that they're seeking safety from a very dangerous circumstance as a minor. And that's where we come in to provide that safety and that stability. And that all of the youth have been through a lot at a young age. So they have all experienced trauma. And that's something we train our foster parents a lot on is trauma and how to support youth that have been through so much. Um, and so, in terms of the demographics of who our youth are, and this is really true across both programs, we have youth from more than 25 countries. The most common countries of origin are Guatemala and Honduras. We've also served many youth from El Salvador and Mexico. We also have youth from different parts of Africa, such as Guinea, Ghana, Eritrea, Congo, or Democratic Republic of the Congo. And for the first time ever, we have a youth from China in our program. So really all across the globe, our youth come to us. And a lot of the times it depends on what is going on in the world. What are the current events that influence the demographics of our program? Whenever you see the news that there's a lot of migrants coming from an area, chances are that that might trickle down and impact our program as well. The exception being Ukraine. We don't currently serve any Ukrainian unaccompanied children. Okay. And goals of our program. So we really want to see all of our youth be successful and prepare for independence, whatever that means for them. So because our youth aren't working towards reunification, they're typically working to become independent. And once they leave our program, the hope is that they have graduated high school, started their first job, maybe have their first apartment, and are ready to be self-sufficient. And you'll notice I keep referring to youth and to high school. It is important to note that most of our youth, although they must come to us as minors, many of them come to us when they're 16 or 17. And so these are teenagers and adolescents that we're working with. By the nature of journeying to the US, oftentimes on foot, without a parent or guardian, you can imagine it's pretty rare for a young child to make that type of a journey. And so that is why we see much older youth in our programs. In the Unaccompanied Refugee Minors program, the youth are moving from being in federal custody, like Antonella was talking about, and are in state custody through the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families. So in the URM program, our kids have the same rights as any child in foster care in Massachusetts, essentially. And so one of those rights is that they can stay in care voluntarily when they turn 18 up until the age of 22 or even 23 if they apply for an extension. So we do also serve young adults in the program as well, which is wonderful because if you've arrived here at 17 and you don't speak English and you haven't even started the 9th grade yet, there's a lot that you have to accomplish before that 22nd birthday. And so that's what our foster parents and our team of staff are working on with the youth. So really important for them to learn English. They're all English language learners at different levels, working on their education. Some of our youth have never been to school in their life, maybe because of war going on in their countries, they weren't able to go, or maybe because education was too expensive where they came from. For example, a lot of our youth from Guatemala haven't gone to school past the 6th grade because education isn't publicly funded past 6th grade. So only wealthy families can afford to send their children to high school. And so there's a lot of educational gaps that our youth are catching up on, getting used to the Americanized curriculum, in addition to also learning English. So it's a lot in terms of their education. And foster families can really help by helping them with homework, helping them practice English, maybe helping look into tutoring resources for them, talking with the teachers. So that's a really big part of a foster parent's role, is to be that educational advocate. Developing job skills and finding employment. So many of our youth are very motivated to work. It's one of many reasons why youth are making the journey to come here. They are fleeing danger, but they also might really be looking for economic opportunity. If their families are living in extreme poverty, some of them have family members that are sick and they want to help pay for medicine. So many of our youth are hoping to work to send money home to family. And so that's a strength of our youth, is that they are very motivated to work. But it's also a challenge because they need to also prioritize their schooling and their education as well. So that's kind of a constant conversation with our youth, is that balance. Um, and of course, they also have to wait until they can get work authorization before they can work. And so sometimes that waiting can be frustrating for the youth when they really want to start a job. Making lifelong connections and achieving permanency. So that's where a foster parent is such a huge support. I mean, imagine being here as a young person with no relatives, in Massachusetts, maybe not even in across the whole country. The foster family really becomes that support system, that lifelong connection for the youth. It's long-term foster care, like I said. So our youth are usually with their foster family for 3, 4, 5 years until they finish high school and move on to college or their first apartment. But we still see youth, going home for the holidays or vacations, spending time with the family. That's their room at home still, just like you would expect for any of your young adult children. And so really great when we see those bonds that form between our families and our youth. And teaching life skills. So that could be so many things: nutrition, budgeting, grocery shopping, cooking. There's just so much that goes into self-sufficiency. So foster families can really help youth to learn those things. It's part of, assigning chores in the home. It's actually teaching life skills. So foster parents definitely play a role in teaching those life skills. And I'm going kind of fast just because I want time for questions. So feel free to put your questions in the chat if you have a question so far. I'm just double checking the slides. Yeah, okay. All right, so the steps to becoming a foster parent. So if you're interested in different types of foster care, this is the best slide for you, because even if you decide you would prefer to do foster care for local children or younger children, this would still be relevant. So once you've chosen the agency, excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of water. Once you've chosen the agency that you'd like to apply for, the first step is to inquire. So we count this info session as an inquiry for all of you. So we will be following up with you via email to see if you're ready to move forward. And the next step would be a phone screening to see if you're eligible to foster. And we can talk about some of those eligibility. But if you are determined eligible over the phone, you'd be invited to apply. And we just do it that way because we don't want you to waste time filling out the written application. If there is something that we know disqualifies you, we don't want you to go through all that extra work when we could just tell you over the phone. But the application is there to, finalize your eligibility. It has just information about your home, who lives in the home, your address, demographic information, things like that. It also includes consents to our background checks. So as you could imagine, as a foster parent, background checks are very thorough. So you have to consent to a Massachusetts Corey check, which many of you might be familiar already if you've worked in school settings or chaperone things. But then that is the Massachusetts Criminal Offender Registry of Information. We also do a DCF history check within the state of Massachusetts and any states you've lived in if you lived in the last 5 years in another state. And that's to see if you've had any history of abusing children or neglecting children. And then we also require fingerprinting, which is a federal background check. And so if you do anticipate anything coming up on those, maybe there was a transgression in your youth 20 years ago, we do ask that you disclose those things to us in advance. because we will more likely be able to work with you if you're honest and upfront about anything. So some things aren't a lifetime disqualification. We try to work with people as long as, there's reasonable explanation for things. And then for the training, this is a big step that people get excited about. We do have to have people determined eligible fully through those first 3 steps before they can come to training. But the training is called the Massachusetts Approach to Partnerships in Parenting, MAP for short, another acronym, MAPP. And that is the state required pre-service training for all foster parents in Massachusetts. So it's what you would have to do at any agency. It's a 30-hour curriculum, and most agencies are offering it hybrid or fully online. And it's supposed to be discussion-based to really get you thinking about whether foster care is right for you and to provide you with as much information as possible to go into that decision of fostering with your eyes fully open. So things that are talked about are the different types of abuse and neglect, how trauma impacts youth, different behaviors you should be prepared to manage, and what it's like to work as part of the social work team. All of those types of things are discussed. Then we have the caregiver assessment. This used to be called the home study, if some of you are familiar with that term. That is where a social worker will come out to your home in person and do a series of interviews. They'll also check for the physical safety of your home and make sure that it meets requirements. Some of those things are having smoke detectors on every floor, carbon monoxide detectors on every floor, owning a fire extinguisher, keeping medications secured, keeping the home relatively clean and safe from any hazards for youth, things like that. Kind of basic things that would make sense. Having an available bedroom for a youth. So youth cannot share a bedroom with an adult. They can share a bedroom with another child if they're the same age and gender identity. But generally speaking, you do need an available bedroom in your home. So we check for those type of things in our first visit. And then it becomes more of a conversation to really get to know you and your family, your parenting history and experiences, if any, kind of your parenting style, how you discipline and provide consequences, or how you envision doing that. So we really get to know you and can hopefully then determine what type of youth would be the best fit in your home. There's a lot of paperwork that's ultimately gathered, and that's what finalizes your licensing. So you should be prepared to complete CPR and first aid training and provide a certificate of that. Get a copy of your unattested driving record from the state of Massachusetts. Earlier in the process, we collect copies of driver's licenses, homeowners or renters insurance. There's a lot of just things we gather. And then matching. So once you're licensed, that's when the journey truly begins. Based on everything we've talked about in the caregiver assessment, we would start to review referral information of youth for your home. And a referral is sort of like a packet of info that we have for any youth that are in need of a foster home. And referral information can be limited. We'll get the name, age, gender of the youth, their religion, their ethnicity, why they're in care. And sometimes there's not much else. Medical information could be limited, educational information could be limited. But based on what we do know, we try to make the best match possible. You are given the opportunity to review that referral and say yes or no. So we're never just going to force a youth upon you and show up at your house with them. It will always be a team discussion to help you make the best decision for your family. That said, we do have urgent situations where we really need people to be open. And we also wouldn't want families to just think of it as a catalog of picking out kids. People do have to be open-minded, and there's no such thing as a perfect match. So at some point, we do need families to take that leap and say yes. And then placement, that is where the youth would arrive to your home And that is not by any means where the journey ends. Our team is still with you every step of the way when the youth begins to live with you. They've become a part of your family, hopefully, and will be visiting once a month to support you. So, as a foster parent, you have a family resource worker that's there for you and visits monthly. And then every child has a case manager that visits monthly. So, you're each getting people to talk to that check in regularly, both to celebrate successes and to help you if there's challenges going on. But something to know is that 2 times a month during business hours, you need to be available for those visits. And so that is part of the commitment of being a foster parent is being available for that ongoing support. Okay. And then who can be a foster parent? So at our agency, you do have to be age 25 or older just because of the age of our youth. At other agencies like DCF, it's 18 and over. But for our agency, it's 25 plus. I do like to say that there's no such thing as too old to be a foster parent. Our oldest foster parent retired a few years ago. She was 90 and she'd been fostering for 13 years. So there really is no such thing as too old. It just depends on your own limits and what you think that you're in good enough health for. Um, and then to be able to provide safety and stability is so important for our kids. They've had so much instability in their lives and they've moved, from another country. Maybe when they got here, they were in a detention center for a few days. Then they were transferred to a shelter for a few days. Then they were transferred to living in a temporary foster home in another state. And then they came to Massachusetts to your home. So they've already experienced a lot of transition. We want to prevent further transition. So if you're going through like a huge change in your life, if you're about to move, if you're about to change careers, if you're going through a divorce actively, that might be a time where you want to wait until things settle before you apply. That said, we welcome foster parents of all kinds. You could be single, you could have a partner, or you could be married. So it's not a requirement to be in a two-parent home and be married or anything like that. You could be a first time or an experienced parent. So we've had both. We have people who are empty nesters who are looking to continue nurturing and, fill their bedrooms and still have that big family. And we have people who have never had children who become parents through foster care. So both are welcome. Housing that meets safety standards, but it could be owned or rented. You don't have to be a homeowner to be a foster parent. You do need to have a stable source of income. There's no number that we assign. It's just that you're able to meet your own needs and not rely on any financial support from our agency. There is financial support provided, but it's supposed to directly be for the needs of the child. So the food for the child, the clothing for the child, the cost of utilities increasing from having a teenager in the home, and things they might need for school, things like that, and transportation as well. So that is what that financial support is for. And of course, especially with our type of foster care, working with refugees and immigrants, we need our families to be culturally sensitive and open to youth of many backgrounds. We serve youth from many different religions who have different dietary restrictions, maybe youth that are Muslim and don't eat pork and only eat halal meat. We have youth that speak many languages. We have youth that are trans, youth that are LGBTQ plus. So really looking for folks that are open-minded to helping our youth. Okay. And the support for foster parents. So I mentioned the financial support. There is the daily rate provided for every day you care for the youth. You receive a payment every 2 weeks. And then there's health insurance provided for all of our youth, either through Mass Health or the federal health insurance. There's 24/7 on-call emergency line. This is true at most agencies. At our agency, there is always an on-call worker that you can reach in an emergency. It could be Saturday at 2 in the morning. There's always someone for you to reach out to. Again, just really want to emphasize that once that youth is placed, it's just the beginning. We're still there with you every step of the way, and you're not in it alone. So, like I said, the monthly visits, those check ins, monthly support groups for the families. So, every Tuesday at 7 p.m., not every Tuesday, one Tuesday a month at 7, we do trainings and gatherings for our families online, and they're always recorded in case anyone can't meet it. So, that's how we do that ongoing training. And we also offer family fun events and bring the kids to different activities. This Friday, we're bringing like 40 youth to Canopy, and I'm a little nervous for everybody. It's going to be a little chaotic. Antonella is braving that, but um, all kinds of different events that we do. We also do a summer barbecue every year in August that we invite all the families to because we're the only unaccompanied refugee minor and unaccompanied children program in Massachusetts. So we're pretty unique, and we find it's really valuable to bring all of our kids and families together when we can. And then referrals to any needed services. So, as a foster parent, you're the mother or father figure. That's what you're there for. You're not a therapist, you're not a doctor, you're not a social worker, you're not a psychotherapist or clinician. So, we can make referrals to those services if they're ever needed. And then ways to help. So, I'm going to pause and ask for questions and then I can revisit this slide. But there are a lot of different ways you can get involved. But what we really hope is that you consider becoming a foster parent, as that is our most urgent need. Um, but I've talked a lot, so I'm going to stop there and I can even stop the screen share. Um, and I'll also stop the recording so that we can have time for questions. But does anyone have any questions?